on 1019 WDET-FM. I'm Tia Graham, and this week we're joined by someone who really doesn't need an introduction at all, Mr. Jerome Vaughn, the longtime news director of WDET. Welcome to the Metro.
Thanks, Tia. Glad to be with you. Today on the show, Saturday is International Overdose Awareness Day. We'll talk with a specialist about the traps of addiction and what the recovery process looks like.
Also, we'll chat about the almost perfect game from Armando Galarraga while playing for the Detroit Tigers 14 years ago. Jerome, I just referenced that was literally the week I graduated from high school. I remember it. I played softball. It was a big deal. It was a big deal.
It was a big deal. Still is to a lot of folks.
It is. But first up on the show, the city of Hamtramck is known for a lot of things. Great Yemeni food, fun soccer games, and a lot of bars. And at one point, Hamtramck had more bars per capita than any city in the U.S. Now, the city nestled between Detroit and Highland Park will be home to a new kind of drinking venue. The brewery Florian East is set to open on Joseph Campo this week. The brewery wants to immerse itself in the culture of Hamtramck. The co-owners plan to serve coffee and non-alcoholic beverages on weekend mornings, screen soccer games, and host food pop-ups. To discuss Florian East and the way the business plans to weave itself inside of Hamtramck, we have two of the co-owners here with us today, Chris Bertley and Shong Kong. Welcome to the Metro.
Good to be here. It's been great.
Awesome. So Shong, starting with you, this brewery took 6 years to get off the ground. What was the inspiration for Florian East?
Well, we wanted to bring something to the community. There are 5 partners, and half of which live in the city of Hamtramck. We noticed, as part of the COVID generation, we becoming sort of increasingly disembodied. People live lives on the internet, and we wanted to create something that could bring the community together. And we purchased the space about 6 years ago, as you mentioned. It's over 100-year building. We saw it has a lot of potential, and it was just a group of friends that wanted to do something for the neighborhood.
Which is just so cool that you all had the will to get to do it. So, Chris, where did the name come from for Florian East?
Yeah, Florian, it kind of came together in a couple of different ways. I think the most obvious way is Florian Street, which is a cross street. Mm-hmm. Also a very well-known, famous church in Hamtramck, named after St. Florian. So I think that's really rooted in what most people would hear, especially from the area and associate it with. But also, and we're on the east side of Florian. But also, we... As my partner Sean said, we started looking at this building. When we bought it, he said it's 100 years old. It looks like it was 100 years old. I mean, it really was. The floor was really falling apart. We had the roof was kind of caving in. So we knew it was going to be a project. And through that process, going through literally seeing the different layers of bricks over the years of the original use of the building, which was a silk shop when Hamtramck first opened as a town, and you see different layers. It's almost like doing an archaeological dig of seeing, okay, what was this person? And then you start seeing from bricks to this kind of paper, and then there's bubble wrap on something, then like a layer of wallpaper, and then you see the different styles of interior design over the years. And when we did that, we got to a layer that was a really interesting, unique floral pattern. And so we saw that we were able to salvage a good amount of it throughout the building, and we thought that it just contrasted very well with the natural brick. And I think we're just not creative enough, but we heard kind of a homonym of Florian flower. We kind of like that, and then that inspired our logo, which is a flower and more of an abstract flower, because we wanted to be more welcoming and kind of different than what you would probably think a brewery would be. So Florian came from the church, which also came from the street, and then also just kind of the flower pattern that we found.
It was just meant to be.
I think so.
It was meant to be. So, Shong, why Hamtramck? You talked a little bit about earlier. You said a lot of you, 3 of you all, live in Hamtramck right now. So, why was it so important to stay there in that particular space?
So, our friend group, like the city itself, is a very diverse group of friends, composed of myself. I'm a Chinese American. One of our partners is Iraqi American, and Chris is African American. And, as a reflection of the city itself, which, historically be a Polish neighborhood, and now the sort of the neighborhood that has a lot of immigrants of Yemenis and Bangladeshi. We just thought, we wanted to, whatever we did there, we wanted to reflect that kind of diversity, both of the neighborhood, of the city, of our friendship. So it was, absolutely important to have a space that could cater to the sort of diversity of needs and interests, coffee, alcohol, non-alcoholic food, a diverse array of different sort of food pop-ups. These are all sort of the core to the mission that we all agreed upon when we started this endeavor.
And this question is going to go to both of you, but I'm thinking about, just like you said, the diversity within the friend group itself, and what ways that lead to such a diverse way of presenting the brewery to the public. Chris, we're going to start with you. Yeah,
it's a great question. I mean, I think that really, if you think about the city and Hamtramck itself and Detroit, as even a more broader sense, it is a city of migrant patterns and immigrants. I mean, I think that we knew that it's been a landing spot for different generations and different waves of people. I mean, I even think that within the African-American context, I mean, we've been a migrant people too, up to the north. So we really wanted to think about this city that has this really interesting and a density to it too. I mean, we're a car area. This is obviously a car history place, but Hamtramck has a density and a walkability to it that is just really unique. And so not only do you have a diversity in the population, but people actually walk past each other. They're on the streets, and that vibrancy and just seeing different waves of immigrants and different generations and people use it, we look at ourselves and we're like, that's something that really brought us together, and we thought that it would make sense in the city as well. So I think that's at the core of it, is just kind of seeing the space, seeing the community, and seeing what it's been to different people. And we wanted to recreate that within our group. So I think that also brings out how we approach the business, because we are a mix of people. Some of us love beer. Some of us, don't drink that often. Some of us want this type of music, that type of music. So it's, in one sense, it can make a business harder to run, because we're really not on the same exact page of what our preferences are. But the final product of that is something that I think appeals to a broader sense of people.
Mm-hmm. Sean, same question. Just, the diversity in the friend group, how did it lend to the Florian East brand? How did it change that or make it?
Yeah, I think I will start. Just a number of us are attorneys. So when we formed our contract in signing our operating agreement, we had a clause in there that said whatever disputes we may have, we will always remain friends. Yeah. So that
you wrote it, and he labeled it a provision of a perpetual friendship. It's in the contract.
we can legally bring suit against the other party if they stop being our friends. So that was important to us, and that was important to us to the business. That was important to us to the vision. Like, whatever differences we may have, we have to sit down and figure out what is the best thing for the project, what's the best thing for the community, and that's always kind of the North Star in our endeavor, in our business decision.
I love that you brought that up, because of course we're going to get to that question, just about working with 5 or 4 other individuals trying to collectively come together for one goal. If you're joining us right now, we're speaking with 2 of the co-owners of Florian East, a brewery that's set to open in Hamtramck this week. And Sean, I want to give that contract to some of my friends too. Like, you cannot stop being my friend. So Chris, I've read that you want to ensure that you want this to fit in with Hamtramck in general. In what ways are you trying to incorporate the brewery into the community? I know you talked about it being really walkable. People can walk past and see it. But we often talk to, especially when we talk to millennials who are business owners, they often talk about that third space value there that's being added. So in what ways do you see yourself immersing in that community?
I think it starts with the people. I mean, number one, we have a very talented brewer. He has been, I think, really, really just, I think, critical in making sure that we stay focused on that. He lives down the street from the brewery. So, it's a place where he literally walks to work, and he has his family, and he's passionate because it's him. It's his place. It's where he wants to be. And I think that's key. I think also we have another kind of key partner that works down the street. He's decided to start his own small business down the street, and he lives a few blocks away too. So I think to be embedded in the community helps to literally be embedded in the community. I think that is, at the focal point of how we approached it. And then looking within our group, looking around, being conscious of the demographics of the city. Hamtramck is a large Muslim population, of course. Hamtramck has, a historical population of many other groups, like Sean said, Polish people to Yemeni people to now Eastern European, African Americans, of course, have been there as well. So to us, I think it's more so our space we think of as a third space. It's a place where if you want to eat, and we have food service at the time, you can eat. If you want to drink, that's there too. But we're going to be very conscious of having mocktails, having things that are non-alcoholic as well. So we want it to feel like a place that if you want to drink, you'll have a great, fantastic beer because we have a fantastic brewer. But if you want something else, or if you want to spend time with your friends, we want you to feel like it's not a bar or a brewery that you feel like, okay, I don't fit in, or I can't really be here.
Yeah.
And I think you'll see that when you walk in, just when you look up and see some colored paintings on the wall from the kids that have been in there, from our friends who their kids need something to do, and all of a sudden our brewer also is a former teacher, public school teacher as well, so he's very conscious to make sure that everyone's involved. So I think that is a part of it, of making it truly a space. Like it's a brewery because we own our equipment, we make everything in-house, and we've made that investment because we think it's critical, but the space as a whole can be enjoyed by everyone.
Yeah. And Shang, why open a brewery at all? It's 5 friends. You all collectively come together. You want to do something in the community in Hamtramck. Why not a coffee shop, or why not a bookshop that's also a coffee shop? Why a brewery?
Yeah. First, the primary reason has to do with wanting to work with our friend Will Mondale, who's a very talented brewer who previously worked at a different brewing company in Metro Detroit. We wanted to do something together. We want to utilize his talent. But the more we thought about it, the more it made sense, in that, like you mentioned at the top, they're to sort of stay true to the history of the city of Hamtramck, there used to be a lot more sort of these third spaces that's based on drinking, bonding, people just having a good time. And also we wanted to sort of see this space as, like Chris said, not just we'll get the beer to bring people over, but we'll screen soccer games. Frankly, there just isn't a good gathering space currently in Hamtramck of immigrants that are devoted to a game of soccer, that for them to get together and watch and hang out. So the beer sprang from our friendship, from our relationship with Will, but also the more we thought about it, the more sort of true to history of the space of the city. We thought it just made a lot of sense.
Yeah. I think I'll add too that the more we looked at it and we learned, and because we had the building, and it's almost like you look at something like something could be in here. You look at it, it's like, what could be in here? And we didn't want to just be landlords of a business that comes in that we don't, it was really appealing us to be involved with what goes on in the building. And we looked around, there was no brewery in Hamtramck. There hasn't been one for many decades. Brewing is a tradition that's very popular with different, all over the world, but especially from many of the migrants that have come to Hamtramck over the years. There's the DCFC soccer team that's really right down the street. So there's already this kind of community culture, walking around, tailgating type atmosphere in Hamtramck. And the brewing itself, especially with some of the changes to the microbrewery laws in the state of Michigan, allow for people who can get into the business to be able to buy very locally. All of our product comes from Michigan farms. We can source things from hop to things that we use to sugar. Our ingredients are local. We hire local, of course. And because it doesn't have this buying from a distributor or from a manufacturer that ships in, you're able to circulate dollars much closer. You're able to make the business more sustainable in a model as opposed as buying from a distributor. So it has these elements that really spoke to us as well of what can be a sustainable business, really sustain employment, and also utilize some of our partners around in a way that's, I think, distinct from a bar or something that has to rely on shipping and things or using distributors. So just the model of a brewery as well, I think, just helped and really fit with kind of what Hamtramck kind of has been for many people too.
Yeah, and 30 seconds before I let you go, I know you all are opening up this week, so just give us the rundown on what you guys are going to be doing this week when you're opening up. Sean, we're going to start with you.
Yeah, our grand open is this Thursday, the 29th, and we're open from 4 to I think 10 o'clock in the evening. Really, we wanted to embrace the festivity that's going to happen this weekend in Hamtramck. So we'll have the taps will be flowing. There will be food. There will be music. We wanted to do something special for the grand open. We wanted to be a little bit of surprise. So show up and you'll find out.
I love it so much. Chris Bertley and Shong Kong are two of the co-owners of Florian East, a new brewery opening up in Hamtramck this Thursday with a grand opening celebration. Show up if you can. Thank you both for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're listening to The Metro on 1019 WDET. I'm Jerome Vaughn. With me, Tia Graham.
Indeed, Jerome. And we do have a special day that's coming up this upcoming Saturday, actually. It's International Overdose Awareness Day. And we'll chat with a specialist about the traps of addiction and what the recovery process looks like coming up next. On 1019 WDET FM, I'm Tia Graham, and I am very, very fortunate to be joined on mic this week by Jerome Vaughn, the news director of WDET, longtime news director of WDET. Jerome, it's like full circle being here.
Well, where else would I be? In the middle of the day, I'm usually down the hall. Today, I'm in the studio, so this makes perfect sense.
It does make perfect sense, and it just feels great to be on mic with someone who's been so influential in my career. So, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you, Tia.
Yes.
I guess we'll jump into it. We're going to talk about drug addiction. It's not a topic that's easy to discuss. That's because there's a lot of pain associated with the issue. Someone hooked on drugs is generally not happy about it. Loved ones around that person are distressed about the situation. But getting people to give up an addiction is not an easy thing to do. The number of people addicted to drugs in the state is unclear, but Michigan does have some data on overdose deaths. Those numbers have skyrocketed from 455 fatalities in 1993 to about 2,800 last year. Thankfully, the number of fatal overdoses has been dropping since 2021. With International Overdose Awareness Day coming up on Saturday, there are a lot of questions on addiction to explore, like what are the causes of addiction and how can we stop it? Dr. Andy King joins us now. He's the medical director for the Michigan Poison and Drug Information Center. He's also director of the Toland Park Research Clinic. Dr. King, welcome to the Metro.
Thanks for having me.
So, what are some of the general causes of addiction? What gets people hooked on drugs?
That is a great question. That is the million-dollar question. We think of addiction as almost a disease of adolescence. It's usually when people get exposure to their first substance, it is in their teenage years, like young adult. And then, there is plenty of research out there talking about the epidemiology about how that progresses over time. And then it's also important to make sure that we're using the right terminology for addiction and risky use, et cetera, when we're talking about this whole space. And so, this is a big topic. In terms of becoming addicted, it really is a mixture of environment and some genetic components too. So, you might notice that some people have families that are prone to substance use disorders, that they'll talk about how, my father and his father, et cetera. But at the same time, there's a social component there too, because, kids may be watching their folks drinking heavily, et cetera, and just access to it. So it's not cut and dry, and there are a lot of different risk factors for it. When people, and then it could just be exposure, like someone just might have the predilection for it. For example, with opioids, we really try to minimize the amount of people that are exposed to opioids because there's a number of people in my clinic and that you can hear from that say like, that was the first time I felt good. That was the first time I felt normal. I felt empowered and funny, and self-esteem was through the roof. Like, I want to feel that again. And so just trying to minimize people to be exposed to those is like a big push too across medicine.
Well, so given that, is it surprising to you that there aren't more people addicted to drugs?
That's another good question. Some of it has to do with just the public health campaign. So let's just take a step back, right? Let's look at, the different substances that people can become addicted to, tobacco, alcohol, opioids, stimulants, etc. And then realize like what is available to them, right? So if you're increasing the availability of something, it's more likely that people are going to get exposed to it, and you might have that predilection to enjoy that substance, and then it can turn from risky behavior into an actual addiction disorder. When you look at American society, you see that a lot of these things are freely available. And then some of the public health campaigns that can help minimize exposure include, not marketing to young folks, right? Increasing taxes on these things to make it a little bit more financially uncomfortable for people who want to do it, so that can be a disincentive. And then in terms of cannabis, there's specific laws to not market to children, so they're not interested in doing these things. So you can't have, I don't remember all the details, but you can't have colorful candies, and you can't have packages that have cartoon characters on there, something that makes it interesting for a kid to want to do, because a lot of these candies or gummies or edibles can look very similar, if not indistinguishable, from some of the products that kids like to have, right? Candy, cookies, etc.
So let me ask you just quickly about that age difference. A lot of kids get hooked in their teenage years. Does it make a big difference between teenagers and early 20s when many of those things are legal?
These are great questions. Yeah. I did want to say a longtime fan, so I'm really happy to be here and putting a voice to the face. And so I wanted to say that that's a great question. When you're talking about risk factors for developing a substance use disorder afterwards, the younger someone is exposed to, the more likely they are to have a problem with it. And so the earlier usage and the people that have some of the more severe disorders, you can see that they started when they were 8 years old or 10 years old or 11 years old. As you get a little bit older, it depends on the person again and what their predilections are, either socially or genetically or environmentally, et cetera. But there's a fair portion of the population that is at risk for developing a substance use disorder. And again, these things exist on a spectrum. If the disease of addiction, and we like to put it in these medical terms, right, is a chronic relapsing condition, and that there are highly effective therapies for, but it's incredibly stigmatized. We thought of it as a social or moral failing, when instead of we should be thinking of it as more of a medical condition, right? Like hypertension or diabetes, et cetera. You can't just yell at someone and say, why don't you stop having high blood pressure, man? It doesn't work that way. It takes time, right, and some practice, and sometimes you can get away with it by modifying lifestyle, diet, exercise, et cetera, but sometimes you just need to be on medications and there's nothing you do about it. And the difference is that there's a lot of, again, stigma for various reasons of those people who have substance use disorders.
If you're just joining us, we're speaking with Dr. Andy King about the causes of addiction ahead of International Overdose Awareness Day on Saturday. What is it that helps people move away from addiction?
Nailing it with the question, sir. So it's really interesting that in addiction, people can sometimes not see the consequences, right? One of the definitions of addiction is that and how to differentiate it from risky behavior or at-risk behavior is that it causes consequences, right? That you have these three stages where at the first part you're, you get the high, or you get the euphoria, you get that effect. The second one is you get the withdrawal, the negative consequences from it. And the third one is you get the cravings and thinking about it a lot. And then when it moves to really the diagnosis of a substance use disorder or the diagnosis of addiction, that's when you have consequences with it, right? Like, I can't cut back even though I want to, right? I crave it and I think about it and it's really bothering me and I can't not think about it. That it's causing consequences, that I'm getting in trouble for it. I'm having a hard time performing at work. I'm losing friends and family. I'm starting to isolate, et cetera. And then it can cause mental health disorders too, and things that can look indistinguishable from just non-substance related depression or anxiety, et cetera. And all those things are really important to consider. So how do you move away from it? It depends on, is someone able to make that connection, that they are suffering consequences from, the substance of their choice, right? Are they having health problems with it? Did they overdose? Is their liver failing, et cetera? Are they spending a lot of their time and money and effort and their whole entire life, circles around the use of that substance, right? And they want to take control. So they're, instead of, that dictating the type of person that they want to be someone else and they want to take control. So there's various motivations for it. Part of the early discussions that we have with people are trying to draw out those motivations, like where is the problem, making that connection with them that, these are the issues that you have, because sometimes we can create a blind spot for ourselves as to, what are the actual consequences involving that substance use.
All right. Dr. Andy King, thanks for joining us today on the Metro.
Thank you.
On 101.9 WDET FM, and continuing the conversation we just had and we just heard from Jerome Vaughn here, ketamine has recently become more popular. How are physicians administering it to help treat depression, and what are the concerns that people should have with this particular drug? We'll discuss that and much more coming up next on the Metro. This is the Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. I am Tia Graham. I am here with WDET's news director, Jerome Vaughn. Jerome, once again, welcome to the Metro.
Glad to be here with you. We had a great conversation with Dr. King.
Yes.
Looking forward to another great conversation coming up here. As you said, I learned a lot in that last segment.
Yes, a lot. It's one of my favorite things about Metro. We get to learn something in every single segment. In this particular one, in the past decade, hallucinogenic drugs have become more and more popular in professional spaces, There's been a raft of studies on acid and mushrooms to understand their potential benefits. And in some clinical settings, medical professionals are administering these drugs to help open people's minds and explore thorny topics causing them real harm. This is also true for ketamine, which is often used to treat depression. Like mushrooms and acid, ketamine is used in recreational settings. It's in these spaces where some people have overdosed on the drug. Recently, and most famously, actor Matthew Perry, who was from the show Friends, died primarily due to the acute effects of ketamine. To discuss ketamine now and the way we use it in our culture and the way doctors are administering it, we have Dr. Cassius Drake here. He is a former ER doctor and the founder of the Drake Center for Transformative Healing in Franklin, Michigan. It's there that he administers ketamine to treat depression, anxiety, and PTSD. Dr. Drake, welcome to the Metro.
Hello, thank you for having me.
And you are a former ER doctor. What led you to pursue this course of medical treatment for patients?
Well, towards the end of my emergency medicine career, I made a decision to pursue a passion of mine, which was to really work with people on the deeper levels of what it took to heal. And ketamine has the advantage of just being a powerful catalyst for helping people get to the deeper issues of what's driving their depression and their anxiety or even their physical disease. So it was a really natural leap for me into this work.
Yeah. So how do you determine when it's appropriate to include ketamine in treatment? It's not used by everyone, of course. Not everyone in the medical field uses it. So in what ways do you determine that it's helpful, beneficial?
So one benefit of being an ER doctor for the 20 years was that I became very comfortable with the use of ketamine. We used it. It's an FDA-approved anesthetic, which we use it on a regular basis to even sedate children as young as 6 months old. So it's very safe. And then over the last 15 years or so, there's been this renaissance of psychedelics and their use in the treatment of mental illness. And ketamine has, it being a synthetic derivative of PCP, has psychedelic properties. And when used as part of a paradigm and a program with support and coaching and integration support, it's a profoundly powerful catalyst for transformative change.
And ketamine is often considered, as we said in the intro, it's often considered a party drug, but also illegal on the streets. How do people obtain it illegally?
Well, just like any medication, if you work hard enough, you can find it. So it's available in lots of ways. There's online pharmacies that make it available. So, if you want it, you can find it. We obviously don't recommend recreational use. We don't really recommend regular use in general. Our approach is these chemicals have the opportunity, and this doesn't apply to ketamine. You also mentioned LSD and also psilocybin. These chemicals have the potential to open people for profound healing and transformative change when used as part of a guided process. And when you're using them that way, it's very safe, and there's a lot of potential for change. But you have to have some guardrails around it.
Yeah. And it recently was in national news because of the death of Matthew Perry from the hit sitcom show Friends. What do we know about the likelihood of overdose when people are using it in a party setting?
Yeah, it's interesting. The coroner's report on Matthew Perry that it was due to the acute effects of ketamine means at the time of his death, he had a very high level of ketamine in his body. Is that what actually was killed him? In retrospect, it would appear that he just drowned in the hot tub because he was on the ketamine at the time. This goes to the point that in general, the chemical itself is very safe. People aren't in general dying from overdosing on ketamine. But if you do something in an unsafe way, if you do this and you get in the hot tub and you go unconscious, if you try to drive, if you try to do any other things, then you will find yourself harming yourself. So, you have to have boundaries and common sense around what you're doing.
And that goes for any type of substance use. Right now, if you're chatting, right now, if you're joining us, we're chatting with Dr. Cassius Drake, the founder of the Drake Center for Transformative Healing in Franklin. We're discussing the way ketamine is being used to treat depression, anxiety, and PTSD. So, back in 1999, ketamine, including all of its variations and forms, were considered a controlled substance under the Controlled Substance Act. It currently has accepted medical uses for short-term sedation and anesthesia, as you said. What gave way to using it to treat severe cases of depression, anxiety, and PTSD?
So the move to use ketamine this way came as sort of this renaissance of psychedelics that happened in the late 1990s and early 2000s. As some other there were moves to seek approval for MDMA, for example. And that movement prompted people to dust off some studies of ketamine, and some said, ketamine has these psychedelic properties, and it's already FDA approved. So once a medication is FDA approved for one thing, for an anesthetic, you can use it for other things. People are very familiar with Ozempic and Wegovy. Ozempic was developed for type 2 diabetes and is used off-label for weight loss. So there was a study done using ketamine off-label in a protocol to treat depression, meaning if we gave this to somebody, will they be less depressed? And lo and behold, they were. And not only were they less depressed, it lasted for a while. So it had this long-lasting benefit, even from one dose, of 1 to 2 weeks of increased mood. Much better than any other SSRI or were able to achieve. Now, that led to growing use and acceptance of ketamine, eventually to the way that we're using it, where we're using it as part of a guided process. So, yes, we'll give you this injection of ketamine. You're going to feel less depressed, and you're going to have some insight into yourself. You're going to have an experience that allows you to think about yourself differently, to shift your relationship with depression, not to just be less depressed, but to shift your relationship with sadness, for example. And then you need help to really figure out what that means. So you might have an experience, and then you need guidance, you need coaching, you need integration, and that's what we provide at the Drake Center. So our focus is really around ketamine is a powerful catalyst for transformative change and healing when used as part of a guided process with guide rails and support and constraints to make sure it's done in the right way.
And honestly, you ended it beautifully there. That was going to be my final question to you, is the integrating of different methods alongside ketamine. So it's not just, you're giving a patient ketamine and sending them on their way. You're giving them ketamine, but you're also giving them a complete array of different services to go along with it. So what are some of those services and how do they work together?
Absolutely. So as part of our process, we provide teaching in various modalities to support these changes in meditation and mindfulness. We bring in creativity work. We use virtual reality headsets, which is also another cutting-edge way to enter an altered state for meditation, for creativity. And it's all about just having that overall structure to support the patient through this process of change, of just walking along with them and being that guide with them through it. The thing about, the psychedelics that's really making that change is that people don't really, talk about, scientifically, these are mystical experiences. This is what we're really talking about. What's really making people feel better? They're having profound spiritual, mystical experiences that show up for them in the way that it shows up for them. And then you need help to figure out what that means. And you need guidance to actually know how to hold on to it, so that becomes something that you can live from the rest of your life even. And that's what we encourage people to achieve.
Dr. Cassis Drake is the founder of the Drake Center for Transformative Healing in Franklin, Michigan. Thank you so very much for joining us on the Metro and explaining to us the uses of ketamine.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Coming up, the Detroit Tigers' Armando Galarraga almost had a perfect game in June 2020. We'll talk about a new documentary that examines that historic game next on the Metro. On 101.9 WDET FM. I am here with Jerome Vaughn, the news director of WDET. I'm Tia Graham. Today, sunny and a high of 91 degrees. Tuesday, 92 degrees, a chance of thunderstorms. Wednesday, 90 degrees again, with a chance of thunderstorms. And it cools down just a little bit. Thursday, 83 degrees and sunny. Friday, still 85 and a chance of rain. Jerome, 2010 was it 14 years ago now? Yeah, it was. And I saw this story coming up and I got angry all over again.
I know. I remember watching this game. I think a lot of us who were Tiger fans at that time remember watching this game. Like I told you earlier, I was graduating high school that week and I was playing softball, so I just was really into baseball, watching baseball. And I just remember watching this game live and just feeling that gut punch.
Yeah, and amazingly, Dr. Drake, who just was on, he was saying he was at that game, and he was saying, I think this is such a boring game, and then it got interesting really fast. Really quickly, and that was one of those experiences I think a lot of people had watching it and going for with that call at the end, man. That took it. Maybe you're wondering what we're talking about. Well, the Tigers aren't that great right now. They're sitting at 4th place in the American League Central, and there's almost no chance that they're going to be in the playoffs. But there are some high points for the team, including pitcher Tariq Skubal. In the recent past, though, the Tigers have had some great pitching moments. One of them is getting a second look. On June 2nd, 2010, Armando Galarraga was pitching for the Tigers against the Cleveland Indians. Galarraga started the season with the AAA Toledo Mud Hens and was called up to Detroit the day before this famous game. Let's take you to the ninth inning right now, where Galarraga was 1 out away from a perfect game.
Ground ball, right side. Cabrera will cut it off. Galarraga covers. He's out. No, he's safe. He is safe. He is safe at first base.
A blown call created a very different moment, and a new documentary from the ESPN series E60 called 28 Outs, An Imperfect Story is revisiting that almost perfect game. To help us do the same, we're joined by Cody Stavenhagen. He's a staff writer covering the Tigers and Major League Baseball for The Athletic. Cody also reported on a special class, a law and society class at Monmouth University in New Jersey, where he spent the semester analyzing an 80-page document created by the class, making the legal case to officially recognize Galarraga's perfect game. That class submitted the paper to the Major League Baseball for review. Larry Jones, the professor of the class, is also with us now. Professor Jones, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for having me. Appreciate that.
So, Professor Jones, where were you when you heard about the game?
Well, at the time, I was on the bench at the time, literally. I was a judge in New Jersey, and the game was an evening game. And what used to happen is the judges would go out to lunch pretty much every day and talk about the day's events and talk about legal stuff. And I wasn't watching the game the day before because I lived in New Jersey and didn't get Tigers games there. But when I went to lunch, that's all about 9 judges were talking about this game and what should happen to it thereafter. And so I went and watched it on replay thereafter on YouTube and stuff like that, and it became obvious that this was a story beyond sports. So I remember that very vividly.
So, Cody, let me come to you. What's your memory of that game?
Yeah, well, first of all, guys, thanks for having me. I was in high school at the time, and I grew up in Texas, not Detroit, but obviously was a huge baseball fan. If I recall correctly, ESPN or maybe another channel had cut to the game in the 8th or 9th inning with Armando chasing perfection. So I remember tuning in and watching that unfold and just following the aftermath. And even at that time thinking, oh my gosh, this is one of the craziest, most mesmerizing things I have ever seen on a baseball field. So I remember it very well. It was fascinating to end up in Detroit and revisit it and spend time with Armando for a story 10 years later.
Oh, cool. Now, can you describe the kind of pitcher Galarraga was? There were only 3 strikeouts in the game, so it was really a team effort in a lot of ways, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, that was very much Galarraga's MO as a pitcher. You know, he was never a guy who had a very high level of success in the major leagues. This was the crowning moment of his career, for better or for worse. He was a sinker-slider type pitcher. When he was able to command the ball, he could generate a lot of ground ball outs. That's mostly what he did that day. And, of course, like most no-hitters or perfect games, there can be some fortuitous luck involved. There was the ball that bounced off him, and I believe it was Brandon Inge made a great play at third base, a famous Austin Jackson play in center field. But Armando was on that day. He threw a lot of strikes. He generated a lot of weak contact. It was the best outing of his career.
So let me ask you, Cody, for folks who are listening who are not huge baseball fans, why is a perfect game so important?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is just baseball and its reverence to history. A perfect game is one of the most difficult things you can do. 27 up, 27 down, no walks, no errors. Nothing happens but you get the men out. And up until Galarraga, I mean, there have only been 23 men in the history of baseball who have thrown perfect games. So it's an incredibly rare achievement in a game that reveres history.
So if you're just joining us, we're discussing the almost perfect game thrown by Detroit Tigers Armando Galarraga in 2010. That game is now being examined by a new ESPN documentary. Cody, did that almost perfect game have repercussions? Did it speed up conversations in baseball about the use of video replay or other technological aids?
Well, yeah, it is interesting to think that this controversy wouldn't exist a couple years later after baseball implemented a replay review. This was part of what helped spur that action in the commissioner's office. So again, it's a little bit of a historical anomaly in that way. If this exact situation happens today, that play is going to be reviewed and that call is going to be overturned, and Armando Galarraga would have thrown a perfect game.
This story, that we're talking about, that we're looking at, is really about an epic mistake, but it's also about forgiveness. Can you talk about Galarraga's reaction in the days and years after this historic mistake was made?
Yeah, that's certainly part of the legacy of this story. The umpire who missed the call at first base, Jim Joyce, was regarded as one of the best umpires in the league. He had a long and successful career. Unfortunately, if you hear the name Jim Joyce and that rings a bell, it is for this moment. But I think the moment that most people remember, all this chaos unfolds. Jim Joyce is getting threats. People are threatening his family. The next day, he is behind the plate for the ensuing game. And Jim Leyland, the Tigers manager at the time, made the great decision to have Armando dress in uniform and present the lineup card before the game to Jim Joyce. So here's this pitcher who was robbed of history. It was basically kind of forgiveness and healing in real time in front of, a crowd that began booing when Jim Joyce walked onto the field the next day. By the end of that meeting at home plate, the crowd was on their feet. They were cheering. Galarraga and Joyce ended up writing a book together. They appeared together at the ESPYs. Galarraga, even when the call was made in that moment on the field, rather than argue or yell, he was standing there smiling, kind of in disbelief. But he said he smiled because he wasn't sure how else to react. He's definitely handled it with a lot of grace. In all the years since, I certainly do think there's a part of him that wishes MLB would go back and revise the history books and make this a perfect game. But he also recognizes, I think, the value of this story. And Jim Joyce has said time after time that he knows he missed the call. He wishes MLB would just reverse it and give Armando a perfect game. It was something he appealed to the commissioner's office at the time, and he still says the same things to this day.
Larry, how did a class in New Jersey decide to get into this game and study it?
Well, the course was Law and Society, and each semester we tried to change up the curriculum a little bit relative to a project, a course project or final project, where the students would get real-life experience in critical thinking and legal analysis, and in something which perhaps they may have an additional interest in. As it turned out, this particular, in the weeks or months really leading up to this particular semester, which was the fall 2021, I had been thinking about the Galarraga game as a possibility because there were so many really not only legal but social issues arising from that, that it was a great case study, particularly for critical thinking skills. When I was looking it up, I saw that Cody had written an article, I believe it was on the 10th anniversary of the Galarraga Perfect Game in The Athletic. I thought it was a really good article. And so we got going on it. And the reality is, I think this E60 special, the ESPN special, would never have come about indirectly had it not been for Cody, because Cody was the first one to report on the students' work. He did an article about it in The Athletic.
Larry, we're going to have to wrap it up there. We're out of time. I wish we had much more time to talk. Thank you so much. Cody Stavenhagen is a staff writer covering the Tigers and Major League Baseball for The Athletic. And Larry Jones is a professor at New Mexico University. Professor Jones, thank you for chatting with us on the Metro.
This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. JV, Jerome Vaughn, and Tia Grant will be back tomorrow.